And Madam Speaker, I just wanted to point out that my good friend and colleague from Minnesota, Congressman Stauber, who is former law enforcement, has twice now released the Justice Act, a common sense police reform bill that would rebuild trust between law enforcement and communities they serve. Why is my colleague, why is it that this has not come to the floor yet? And why is that not part of the package that we're looking at? Congressman Stauber was a police officer for 20 years. He knows law enforcement exists to serve America's communities, and he knows what is needed to rebuild the damaged relationship between officers and civilians. The Just and Unifying Solutions to Invigorate Communities Everywhere, or the Justice Act, would fund better training for police officers, increase the number of body cameras, and provide important grants to police departments to help implement community policing best practices. Sound familiar? And he introduced this bill this Congress and last Congress, and yet despite its past bipartisan support, Democrats continuously blocked efforts to bring this to the floor. Why would Democrats block such a common sense bill for years and now decide it's necessary to pass these bills? Let's just take a look at what they spent time promoting instead. For example, the Democrats' so-called George Floyd Justice in Policing Act is a divisive bill being pushed through by the majority without any Republican input. Disguised as accountability, the bill would make communities less safe, hinder law enforcement's ability to do their job, limit the readiness of law enforcement, and demonizes an entire profession for the actions of a few. It eliminates qualified immunity protections for federal, state, and local law enforcement officers, which protect officers who have to operate in high-pressure, quick decision environment. It lowers the mental standard for federal civil rights lawsuits. It also it allows officer convictions even if the officer has no specific intent to deprive a person of a federal right. I have given a couple of examples of good, strong Republican legislation that was not considered as even part of the Democrats' so-called police or law enforcement support grouping of bills that they've put together today in an emergency meeting yesterday. If there was truly support for law enforcement, they would have come together in a bipartisan manner, discussed it with law enforcement, discussed it with the minority, and really come together and created legislation that would truly do what we needed to do, and that's support and help our law enforcement. I reserve, and I am prepared to close.
Gentlewoman continues to be recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I should have Madam Speaker, I should have just gone right into it. But today's debate is nothing more than a political stunt, as I have mentioned. The Democrats have put forward these bills at the last minute so they can go home this weekend and pretend they have done something to help police in this country. I mentioned it before. If the majority was sincere about supporting law enforcement, they would have involved the minority. They would have had the discussion about the bills that the minority, good, solid bills that the minority has put forward. And they would have had the discussions with law enforcement across the country to find real solutions. Our police do need our help. There's a war on police in this country thanks to the efforts of those on the far left. They know it, I know it, and the American people know it. But these bills are just one more insincere attempt. One mostly recreates programs that already exist within the DOJ. The other includes a section that still gives preference to efforts that do not include recruitment and retainment. Honestly, Madam Speaker, my colleagues should be embarrassed and ashamed of this political stunt, especially when it comes to something that affects everyone's safety and the American people's safety. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I oppose the rule and encourage members to do the same, and I yield the balance of my time.